In 1969, Fender declared officially closed the experience of the Electric 12. The solid body guitar with 12 strings had run its course after a short-lived hype in the mid-1960s. Even so, the Fender Electric 12 left an indelible mark in the history of music of our time. It played a crucial role in important studio recordings, contributing to timeless classics. I have here an original vintage Fender Electric 12 from 1965, so it's finally time to become familiar with this unique instrument. We are just about to know everything about its features, its compelling history, and we're going to find out how it plays and sounds. Here is a comprehensive double-length episode rich of exclusive first-hand information and some well-hidden secrets. If you love vintage and vintage-inspired guitar gear, please subscribe and support Bob Stone Review, the channel with cherry sunburst frame, always delivering serious original content. To get started, especially to the benefit of neophytes, why this bizarre idea of doubling the number of strings on a guitar? Are not 6 strings enough? In a 12-string guitar, each of the traditional 6 strings is doubled, forming 6 pairs of strings. The gap between the strings in each pair is narrow, allowing them to be fretted and picked together as if they were a single string. This means that basically 12-string guitars are used with the same fingering technique of traditional 6-string guitars. The neck and the nut are typically slightly wider than a traditional guitar to accommodate the extra strings. The high E and B strings are simply paired in unison, while the 4 lower strings, G, D, A and low E, are tuned in intervals of an octave. The idea is basically to produce a bolder sound, more harmonically resonant and articulate than 6-string instruments. Also, the sound of 12-string guitars is characterized by some sorts of chorusing effect, especially on solo parts and arpeggios. The strings are usually arranged so that the thinner, higher string of each pair is struck first on a downward strum. However, some manufacturers, such as Rickenbacker and Echo, use a reverse arrangement, where the thicker strings, providing the lower octave, are struck first. I personally tend to consider this setup more intuitive. Seems that the first 12-string guitars were created by Italian luthiers. These artisans came from an ancient tradition of doubling the strings on instruments such as the lute and mandolin. It's likely that in the late 19th century they experimented in American guitar factories by doubling the strings of guitars. Early examples of 12-string guitars were used by Mexican mariachi bands. However, these instruments didn't really gain popularity until the 1930s and 1940s, when they became more common among folk and blues musicians in the United States. In particular, Lead Belly is regarded as the artist who, more than any other, helped the 12-string to gain widespread popularity. Two brothers from Missouri, Russ and Claude Diva, were the first to bring the 12-string concept in an electric guitar. In 1954, they built the Stratosphere Twin, a double-neck guitar combining both a conventional 6-string neck and a 12-string neck. This pioneering instrument was championed by guitar virtuoso Jimmy Bryant. It was manufactured only for a few years in a limited quantity of a couple of hundred units. The advertisement used a bombastic catchphrase. Melodies played on the 12-string neck sound like multiple recording. Gibson presented a similar double neck model at the 1957 July NAMM show in Chicago, the hollow body EDS 1275 Double 12. This instrument was custom built and available only on special order. Seems that less than 40 pieces were ever built. Early examples even do not carry a serial number. Gibson's catchphrase was "a completely new and exciting instrument for reinforced resonance and unusual tone effects." After a major restyling in 1962, the EDS 1275 became a solid body with a shape inspired by the SG and became also known as SG Double Neck. Nat Daniel, the founder of Danelectro, consistently pioneered innovative instruments. In 1961, he developed the Bell Zuki with popular New York Italian-American session guitarist Vinnie Bell, finally creating a single-neck electric guitar fully dedicated to the 12-string playing technique. In fact, the Bell Zuki, available in two versions, brought the electric 12-string guitar to market. It was launched with the most bombastic catchphrase. They evoke the mysterious charm and flavor of remote times and places, yet are easily played using familiar guitar technique. In 1963, the Rickenbacker Company created a 12-string guitar based on their 360 model. A smart configuration of the tuners kept the size of the headstock compact. As seen in BTR number 56, on February 8, 1964, the second prototype of this new 360-12 model was given to George Harrison while the Beatles were in New York City during their first US tour. Harrison took the new Rickenbacker back to London with him, and it became one of his main guitars, defining the Beatles' sound in a dozen of classics, including A Hard Day's Night and Ticket to Ride. This made the 360-12 the first electric 12-string to have an impact on the market. The catchphrase of the launch campaign was "Now a new dimension in sound." The influence of the Beatles on the musicians of their time cannot be overstated. Many bands wanted to sound like the Beatles and started purchasing the new 12-string Rickenbacker. One of these bands were the Byrds. Their guitar player Roger McGuinn found that the 12-string Rickenbacker was a perfect match for the folk rock musical identity of his band. The Byrds were destined to become other influential ambassadors of the 12-string sonic potential. The time was right. Clarence Leo Fender could not stand idly by. In late 1964, he had started to develop the design of an electric solid-body 12-string model. This happened just about when Leo decided to sell his relatively small independent company to a large corporation. Leo Fender arrived later than his competitors, but, as usual, he recovered the disadvantage. While the 12-string Rickenbacker was simply an adaptation of the previous 360 6-string model, Leo Fender instead chose to design an entirely new model from scratch. On January 4, 1965, the important step was accomplished. The Fender Electric Instruments Company was sold to Columbia Records Distribution Corporation, a subsidiary of Columbia Broadcasting Systems, known as CBS. The agreed amount was $13 million, multiplied by 10 to get a rough idea of the current value. The new ownership changed the name to Fender Musical Instruments and took full possession in February 1965. The new 12-string model was brought to the prototype stage. On January 20, 1965, the Byrds recorded an electrified cover of Bob Dylan's Mr. Tambourine Man. The track was released as a single on April 12th, ahead of the album of the same name. In just 1 month, the record started to climb the charts. In a consistent marketing strategy, the CBS management insisted that the recording artists signed to Columbia Records should showcase Fender instruments in their photos and TV appearances. It just happened that the Byrds were Columbia artists. On May 11, 1965, they presented their new single at the American musical variety TV show Hullabaloo on NBC. While in the studio recording Gene Clark played a tambourine, someone thought that in a TV playback performance it would be more useful if he showcased a pre-production prototype of the new Fender 12-string electric solid body. Therefore, funny enough, Clark dropped the tambourine on Mr. Tambourine Man and mimicked playing the 12-string Fender, right alongside Roger McGuinn, who proudly brandished the Rickenbacker 36012 that he had actually used on the studio recording. The following month, in June 1965, 4 months after the CBS takeover, the new model was finally ready to hit the market. It was given the straightforward name Electric 12, with the number 12 written in Roman numerals. It would be the last guitar with an original design by Leo Fender released by the company he founded. The list price was $339 plus $17 for a custom color finish. In July 1965, the Mr. Tambourine Man single reached the top position on both the US Billboard Hot 100 chart and the UK Singles chart. In just 6 weeks from its launch, the signature guitar tone on this recording would become popular with the definition of jingle jangle sound. The Electric 12 proved to have the wind in its sails. It could not have been launched at a more favorable moment. It arrived on the market with great timing and a good promotion. The interest around these instruments was so promising that Fender in 1967 even introduced a second 12-string electric model, the Coronado 12 hollow body, designed by Roger Russ Miles. My longtime guitar friend Giacomo Bagorda was so kind to lend me a prestigious piece from his collection, a late 1965 Electric 12. It even comes with its original instruction booklet. A peculiarity that doesn't go unnoticed is the long headstock designed to easily accommodate the 12 tuning keys. Its characteristic shape earned the nickname of hockey stick. A large retainer holds the central strings firmly in place through the nut slots. The hockey stick design was also used on the Coronado 12 semi-acoustic and the two Fender 12-string acoustics, the Shenandoah and the Villager. The body shape features an asymmetrical or offset waist, a hallmark of Leo Fender's design, seen on models like the Jazzmaster, Jaguar and Bass Sixth. More distinctive features, typical to the Fullerton production, were the bolt-on neck and a 25.5-inch scale length, same as the flagship models. The bridge design gives the Electric 12 an edge over competitor models. Its blueprint is based on the same trapezoidal steel plate used on the Duosonic II, introduced in mid-1964, but boasts 12 individually adjustable barrel-type saddles. This bridge, combined with the string-through-body loading, results in precise and stable intonation. The two pickups inherited the split single-coil design from the 1957 Fender Precision bass. Let's dive into the hidden details of their story. The early 1950s Precision single-coil pickup boasted strong attack, prominent output, and powerful low end. But the downside was that it often blew the speakers of the Bassman amplifiers of the time. Also, it was prone to hum and noise. In 1957, the Precision bass received a major restyling, influenced by the design of the new Stratocaster. Leo Fender wanted to switch to a new type of pickup to solve those known issues. Seth Lover had freshly developed for Gibson the innovative humbucker pickup. So, for the new Precision pickup, Leo took inspiration from Seth Lover's design and created a single coil split into separate half-length coils, connected in a humbucking mode. One coil had opposite polarity and reverse winding relative to the other. Basically, Leo Fender created what could be technically considered a humbucker without using two parallel full-length bobbins. Leo feared that his split coil design might be considered an infringement of Seth Lover's patent on the humbucker. To reduce the risk of a lawsuit from Gibson, he avoided drawing attention on this aspect of his design in official Fender advertising and literature. With the Electric 12, Leo Fender brought, for the first time, the split coil concept on a guitar. Seth Lover's patent was still in force, so the hum cancelling feature was kept confidential. In 1979, after selling Fender and leaving Music Man, Leo Fender rejoined his former associate George Fullerton and created the G&L brand. In 1988, Leo Fender put all his experience into the Comanche, a sort of an upgraded Stratocaster. This model mounts a distinctive Z-coils pickup. Seth Lover's patent had now expired since the 1970s, and the Comanche brochure finally advertised with great fanfare the Z-coils as G&L exclusive patented new single-coil humbuckers. The Z-coils were none other than a revamped edition of the old Electric 12 split coils. To complement the split coils for hum-free operation, the cavities of the Electric 12 were covered with brass ground shielding plates. The control plate simply mounts one volume and one tone master controls with black amp-style knobs. The pickup selector is a comfortable four-way rotary switch. The first two positions allow to select either of the two pickups. The third position provides the two pickups together out of phase with each other, with typical scooped middle frequencies. The manual refers to this sound as separate wide range effect. The fourth position would be supposed to engage both pickups together in phase. On some first production year models, it's reported that the fourth position simply returns to the neck pickup and it's identical to the first one. This guitar is in fact one of those. The older body has three-tone sunburst nitrocellulose lacquer finish, which was the standard. The first sunburst models came with a white perloid pickguard, but Fender quickly switched to tortoise shell. The Electric 12 was also offered in the other usual custom colors finishes of the day. Most custom color models had a white pick guard and came with a cool matching headstock finish. Initially, the Fender Electric 12 had a simple unbound rosewood fingerboard with dot position markers. In December 1965, the neck was refined with white binding, a clear sign that the new CBS management was still trying to improve the quality of their products. Also in late 1965, they switched from the Cluson Deluxe tuners to the F tuners typical of the CBS production. Giacomo's guitar, in fact, shows an interesting transitional feature common to other Electric 12s from the same period. It had already been drilled at the factory for Clusons, but was eventually fitted with newer style tuners. I read a listing for a 1966 Electric 12 from a well-known vintage guitar dealer, which mentioned that the back of the headstock shows very faint signs that the guitar once had Cluson tuners. The good news is that those signs are original from factory. My guess is that the Clusons used on the treble side of the headstock, which have the same orientation of those used on left-handed models, were in short supply, so the Electric 12 adopted the F tuners way before other models did. Another common transitional feature is that the bridge presents nickel plating on the saddles and later chrome plating on the trapezoidal plate. 1966 was the year when the great majority of Electric 12s were produced. In mid-1966, the dot fretboard markers were replaced by block inlays, maybe an effort to keep up with the upmarket elegance of 12-string Rickenbackers. The Electric 12 was a solid, reliable instrument that saw widespread use in studio applications. It had good tone and likely played more comfortably than any competitor. Even so, the Fender 12-string electric never truly gained popularity as a live instrument. By 1967, it became clear that the 12-string electrics had not successfully moved beyond their honeymoon period in the market. The 12-string trend in popular music was in rapid decline. As the 12-string craze faded, sales of the Electric 12 dropped, even faster than the company could ever predict. With demand in steady and dramatic decline, the model was eventually removed from catalogs in May 1969. The Coronado 12 survived for a couple of more years. It's worth noting that today we have the benefit of historical perspective. We know that the Electric 12-string guitar trend passed quickly, while certain other guitars were destined to lead the market and keep selling in large numbers to this day. In contrast, back in the mid-1960s, when Leo Fender and other musical instrument manufacturers sold their companies to large corporations, they had no idea how long their products would stay in demand. From their point of view, electric guitars might have been a fad, possibly destined to fade with the beat explosion just as quickly as it had emerged. Investing millions of dollars to expand their relatively small companies was a major risk. This was a determining factor that led large corporations like CBS and Norling to take over the market. After the Electric 12 was discontinued, Fender remained with a large stockpile of leftover parts. In mid-1969, the company decided to repurpose these parts under the camouflage of a new six-string model. Longtime Fender employee Virgilio "Babe" Simoni had the brilliant idea of butchering the body with a bandsaw, in a hopeless attempt to disguise their origin and simulate an improbable stylish design. They hid the holes drilled in the headstock with laminate maple veneer, plugged the root for the string-through tailpiece in the back of the body, installed the vibrato tailpiece of the Mustang, and assembled the parts with a six-string setup. This freak guitar model was initially given the plain name Custom, later rebaptized Maverick. All the necks feature white plastic binding and block inlays, and carry date stamps ranging from 1966 to 1968. To up the ante and make the bluff more convincing, the guitar was even priced higher than the Telecaster in the 1970 price list. A quick price drop followed once customers caught on. It is estimated that 600 to 800 Custom or Maverick guitars were marketed until they eventually went extinct in 1971. Through the following years, Fender made occasionally a few runs of guitars in 12-string version, especially Stratocaster made in Japan. The Electric 12 resurfaces on and off. It was recently reissued in the Alternate Reality series. Contributing factor to the Electric 12's commercial failure was the lack of influential endorsements during its production.
Hey, listen, world, you gotta know, I'm cutting loose and letting go.
The Electric 12 made a brief appearance on an Elvis Presley movie in 1966. That same year, Bob Dylan was photographed using an early model in studio while recording Blonde on Blonde. Eric Clapton and Pete Townsend had quick flirts, but the real moments of glory of the Electric 12 ironically came only after it was discontinued. In particular, Jimmy Page used his 1965 Electric 12 in a few historic studio recordings. In May 1966, he recorded the epic chord progression for Jeff Beck's solo single, Beck's Bolero.
Ladies and gentlemen, a big chunk of Led Zeppelin. Right here, Jimmy Page!
In 2009, this iconic session was revived during a memorable live performance at Jeff Beck's induction ceremony into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. In 1967, Page also acquired a 12-string Vox Phantom, which he used on a couple of songs for the Led Zeppelin second album. In December 1970, Page used both the Vox Phantom 12 and the Electric 12 during the studio recording of Stairway to Heaven. Page mentioned that the Vox and the Fender have a similar sound, and choosing between them was just a matter of playability and feel. Jimmy Page returned to using the Fender Electric 12 exclusively for the studio recording of The Song Remains the Same on the album Houses of the Holy, released in 1973. This track is probably the most iconic showcase of the Fender 12-string. In Led Zeppelin's live shows, Page chose his custom-built Gibson SG double neck, which allowed him to switch seamlessly between 12-string and 6-string parts. Other notable players of the original Electric 12 from the 1960s were the Velvet Underground. The two guitarists, Lou Reed and Sterling Morrison, even had one each. The Electric 12 can be heard on magnificent tracks such as Beginning to See the Light and What Goes On, from the band's third self-titled album, released in 1969.
In the sea.
The genius Tim Buckley, father of Jeff, used the Fender Electric 12 extensively throughout his repertoire. It's rumored that when he died in 1975 at the age of 28, the Electric 12 and an amplifier were his only earthly possessions. I first saw Johnny Winter when I was 18 on an Italian TV rebroadcast of his 1970 appearance on the German show Beat Club. I was absolutely astonished by his playing style and became a huge fan. When YouTube arrived, I realized that in that video he was playing the song Mean Town Blues with a Fender Electric 12 set up with 6 strings only. In those days he used this guitar for his open tuning songs, and he also brought it on stage at the Woodstock Festival. I think it's fair to assume that he had also used it on his groundbreaking studio album The Progressive Blues Experiment. Johnny Winter showed that the Fender can sound more aggressive than other 12-string models. So, if you come across an Electric 12 and you want to use it with a traditional 6-string setup, just know that it can be done with excellent results. Even more than that, some players experiment a personal setup with 8, 9 or 10 strings. For instance, they use high strings as single strings for soloing, while they double a pair of the lower strings for bolder harmonic accents. I'm convinced that unusual instruments lead to exploring unusual paths, taking both the player and the listener out of their comfort zones. That's where the most interesting ideas are born. In this perspective, the glorious Fender Electric 12 has probably yet to reveal its full sonic potential. Please let me know your thoughts and feedbacks in the comments below. Subscribe now and click the bell to keep posted. Join the Facebook group Bob Stone Review and follow my Instagram profile.